Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is Mr. Lowell. Today should be Friday, April 24th, and we are introducing our next topic of study, which is the American Civil War. This assignment is just like the assignment you did on the last topic. It's viewing a slideshow I've created. I'm making a video along with notes that are in the slideshow. Your assignment is to respond to questions from the slideshow. You'll have to make a copy of this document. You'll have to answer the questions, and then you'll have to turn it in for credit. Its due date is Monday. Um, wait, yeah, the due date is Monday. Today's the April 24th, Friday. It's due Monday, April 27th. So, the American Civil War, or as Americans call it, the Civil War, lasted 4 years, 1861 to 1865. The essential question here is, what should you know about the American Civil War? Is one of the most famous topics in American history, has a huge impact on the development of America. And as an educated person, you should know some things about our Civil War. Our first chunk or topic is called War Erupts. The American Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. It was an internal struggle, that is, a civil war, American versus American, between the North and the South. They fought over states' rights, slavery, and the future of America. It took the lives of over 620,000 people. To put that into perspective, that is more loss of life than any other war America had or would be involved in, including World War II. But consider the fact that this is American versus American, so all casualties, all deaths are American. You'll notice in this image that each man fighting each other looks identical. You have the Northern Union soldier and the Southern Confederate soldier. That's because this was literally American versus American. In some cases, men, fathers, sons, cousins, and even uncles fought each other and met each other on the battlefield. The North was called the Union and consisted mostly of northern and western states that were free states that stayed with the United States on the battlefield. They wore navy blue uniforms, and Abraham Lincoln was their president, the president of the United States. The South was called the Confederacy, and it consisted of those southern states that rebelled and seceded from the Union starting in 1860, those slave states. On the battlefield, these soldiers wore gray uniforms. Jefferson Davis was their president of the Confederate States of America. The war officially begins in April of 1861 when the Confederacy fired shots on a federal fort, Fort Sumter in South Carolina. They attacked this fort because it was a crucial, important fort for the North, and the attack on it kind of made it more difficult for the Union to push ahead in this war. The attack on a Union fort in a rebellious state marked the beginning of the war between both sides. This map, as you can see, clearly shows the divisions between the Union and the Confederate States. So here in the blue, we have the Union, mostly northern and some western states. And you have the South, which is the Confederate States of America. But also notice these border states: Missouri, Kentucky, Delaware, Maryland. These were literal border states. They bordered between the North and South. But more importantly, they were slave states that did not secede. They stayed part of the Union. So there were, as you can see, states here that held slaves that still stayed on the side of the Union. In this war, the South did not want to conquer the North, but rather they wanted to break away and become independent of it. So the man in this photograph was Robert E. Lee, and he was the commanding general of the Confederate Army. Lee did not believe in slavery, but he was willing to lead the Confederate Army to defend their southern land. He was a military genius, and Lee was one reason why the South had a fighting chance in this war. The Confederate strategy for winning this war was cotton. The South believed that cotton could help them win this war. King Cotton, which was the title given to cotton's importance, would be their strategy for winning foreign support. That is, that Southern leaders believed that if they withheld cotton from foreign markets, it would force European nations to come to their aid and help them fight the Union. They thought that because cotton was such an important global resource, these European nations would help them fight. Fortunately, European nations had already had enough cotton supply and were starting to plant cotton in other parts of the world that they never came to the South's aid. The Union had many capable generals and educated military men on its side, but their leading general of the Union Army was Ulysses S. Grant. And after the war, he would eventually become the 18th president of the United States. You might recognize his face. He's on the $50 bill today. The Union's goal in fighting this war was to bring the South back into the Union. The southern seceding states, get them to come back into the United States. To do this, the Union would be invading the South and forcing them back. The Union strategy for winning this war was called the Anaconda Plan. So just like an anaconda snake, they would surround the South and create what we call a military blockade, not allowing ships to come in or go out. By land and by sea, they would block the South and force it to give up. If you think about an anaconda snake, it wraps itself around its prey and chokes it until it dies. So this was the plan. They would have a naval blockade around the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic, and then up the Mississippi to kind of control the South. This political cartoon, which was published during the time, shows the snake, the anaconda, choking out the southern leaders of each of the various seceding states. In the middle here, you can see Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. The first major battle took place in Virginia and was called the First Battle of Bull Run. It was a Confederate victory that shocked the Union and indeed the country. It proved that the South was capable of fighting this war and that it was going to be a very long war. When the war first broke out, both sides, the North and South, believed it was going to be a very short war. They believed that after a few months of fighting, either the Confederates would come back or they would stay seceded. But this war and this battle proved that it was going to be really long. Okay, so a couple questions to consider after viewing this is, what were the different sides fighting in the American Civil War, and what was each side called? And what were the Union and Confederate strategies for winning the war? Our next topic is titled Life in the Army. Soldiers in both the Union and Confederate armies were made up of mostly young men from the age of about 18 to 30. Most were farmers, came from farms. They were young men, joined the army for a lot of reasons. Some believed in their cause's side. If you were a northern soldier, you might say, I believe in restoring the Union. If you were a southerner, you're like, I believe in our right to own slaves. So some joined for the cause. Some just sought adventure. It was their ability to tell a story. I fought in war. I had an adventure. Some just wanted to escape a life of boredom. Farm life can be pretty boring. There were approximately 3 million men who served in this war, about 2 million on the side of the Union and about 1 million on the side of the Confederates. Soldiers faced really awful conditions on the battlefield. A battle could last a couple of weeks or days, and it was often cold and wet and muddy. Soldiers often lacked the things they needed on the battlefield. Shoes, the soles of shoes would die out real quick. Sometimes there wasn't enough food or medical supplies. And as a result, a lot of soldiers died on the battlefield, not of casualties like gunshot wounds, but just of disease and starvation. Life in the camps was even worse. Most of the war was spent in camps waiting for orders to attack or defend. Camps were unclean with piled up garbage and a lack of outdoor toilets. So imagine thousands of men living in a camp and they're urinating, they're defecating in basically holes outside the camp, so that brings in rats, which helps spread disease. Soldiers went weeks without bathing or washing their clothes. As a result, they formed lice and other body fleas. Such bad hygiene created widespread sickness. Hygiene, taking care of yourself. These men didn't. They didn't really brush their teeth or wash. An unknown fact is that disease killed more people in the Civil War than battle wounds. Notice that we're looking at photographs. By the 1840s, photography was invented, and much of the Civil War was captured in real photographs. Wars before this time were captured through paintings. that were often painted years after the event even happened. These photographs really changed public perception of the war. When people saw real photos of people having been shot and maimed and bloody, it caused it's different than looking at a painting. And so when you see real violence and death in photography, it made more people inclined to not support the war and to kind of hope for its eventual end. Okay, a couple questions to consider. Who fought in this war? Why did they fight? And what hardships did soldiers face during the war? By hardships, we mean what were difficulties that they faced. Chunk 3 here talks about military technology. So the Civil War is considered the first modern war, an industrial war. And what that means is that factories and manufacturing produced war supplies faster than any time before. So you had factories that could crank out bullets and guns and other materials quickly and on a large scale. New military technology would also increase the death toll. As military technology gets more advanced, it also means that there's more death. Here are one of the military technologies at the time called the Minie Ball. And the Minie Ball is a new bullet technology that caused a lot more deaths on the battlefield. It's a hollowed out bullet, and so this bullet could spin in the grooves of a rifle a lot better. It could shoot farther, more accurate. They also had a hollow base, and sometimes shrapnel and other things were put inside these bullets so that when they penetrated the skin and they went into the soldier, it would all that metal would spread and kind of destroy organs and such. Before this, people used lead pellets, which could either get lodged in you or go right through you. They could kill you, but this new bullet technology was far more dangerous. They also had a new ship technology. It was called the Ironclad. These are warships made of iron that were almost impossible to sink. And from out at sea, they could shoot on land, and they could kind of bombard local towns. So a new kind of ship technology. The cannons were not new, but mobile cannons were new. The idea that a cannon could be moved across a battlefield changed warfare for the next 40 years. These mobile cannons also increased the death toll. The Gatling gun was a mobile automatic repeating rifle. Think of it as a precursor to a machine gun. It was introduced during the war and caused a huge increase in battlefield deaths. Hot air balloons were actually invented during this time, and they weren't used for battle, but they're mostly used for spying on the enemy. And so, like, each side would use them to kind of see where troops were moving or to kind of flank groups on a battlefield. So it wasn't necessarily to kill people, but it was used as a spy technique. So part of the reason that over 620,000 men died in this war is because of these military technologies. They unfortunately caused a much larger number of people to die. Okay, so here is the question for this chunk. It says, what new military technology caused a sharp increase in the death toll? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the end of the first video, part 1 of this slideshow. You can go ahead and click on the next one for the next chunk.